Hello, everyone. This is your friendly neighborhood ex-Muslim, Abdullah Sameer. I'm joined by a very special guest by the name of Joseph Colden. Joseph is a former Muslim and also a former Muslim convert. So he converted to Islam and then left Islam. In a sense, similar to what I went through. I converted to Sunni Islam and I left Islam. So we have already quite a bit in common. And Joseph is in the UK. Joseph, how's it going?
Good, man. I'm good. I'm very good, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to be on a stream with you. I mean, we tried setting it up and finally it's happened. So yeah, it's good, man.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So you grew up in the UK, did you? Or where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, in the north of the UK. And, I grew up in a Christian home, I would say. We had a lot of Christian influence growing up through the church or whatever. Kind of a small place, it's kind of cool. So yeah, I don't know what to say about my childhood, but yeah, it was fine. It was great.
In the UK, let's say typical white suburb, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So how did you find out about Islam then, and like what made you want to convert to Islam?
So I went to university, went through college and stuff like that. And then I went to university to study music and multimedia, sonic arts, and kind of get into that. So I went to university, kind of like a city close to me, and it was my first experience, like most people that age, sort of 18, away from home and with loads of freshers. You're all there to learn, meant to be. You're all there to learn, and it's kind of like you get introduced to people from all different backgrounds and all over. So in my flat at university, I had like mixed dorms. So it was 4 girls and three guys. And 2 of the guys that I happened to get put in mixed dorms with were Muslim. And although they weren't necessarily very strict at all, they were when it came to Ramadan and like other times like that. But really, I'd grown up in quite a isolated way away from Islam. It wasn't something that was rarely talked about, apart from maybe my father, who said, Islam is, they claim their line from Ishmael, and, Christians would claim their line from Isaac, and Jews. So that was really all I knew. So then kind of like went to university and became friends with these 2 guys, Sayab, Haroon. And, it was over the course of, say, like 2 years while I was at university that they introduced Islam to me and showed me, like, say, the Quran and things like that. But it wasn't major. I mean, they went out and partied, so they weren't like big what's the word?
They were basically like moderate Muslims. They were like, they were not like
I think they were. I think a lot of the time, when the mum come and stuff like, I've not been drinking, they weren't at all practicing. But even someone who's not practicing still gives dawah. It's interesting. They do, because they can have their, later I could obviously understood that they can have their sins kind of took away, or a lot of it, from someone coming to Islam through their work, through their efforts. So all this stuff that they've done, if they say bring someone to Islam, then that that goes in their favor. So they would, I remember kind of Ramadan, I'd been out drinking, I'd been out partying or whatever, and they were breaking their fast, and I had come back. So they were all breaking their fast because they were quite good during Ramadan. They were trying to clean up for the rest of the year. And I came back and they were all eating, breaking their fast. And they said, "Oh, Joseph, do you want to come in and join us?" I'm like, "Mate, I've just been to the pub. I can't really come and sit in." But they insisted, and you just go and join them after, you've had a few, and just like, I wasn't kind of, I knew they were breaking their fast, but they were silent. They were just sat and talking about stories of Muhammad at the time, so it was this slow but surely introduction that when I came back from university, I had already got a ground knowledge of it. And then it took a later meetings with someone else at the hospital that I worked at, another doctor that kind of set that path in motion even more, you know. And it's, you know, I've made a video on this about the convert lie, you know. It's worked on and worked on. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that I learned early on about Muhammad, with what I've learned now, you know, right the way through, and then my self-studies and things, you can see that twisted massively out of context of who Muhammad was. You know,
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. But let's explore your previous life a little bit. So what you were saying was what did you mean by, is that what you meant by the convert lie? You're saying that some of the stuff okay. So
it's a slow process, you know, that some don't, you know, some are given all the information up front about who Muhammad was, and they still convert.
Yeah.
For me, if I had known the information I know now about Muhammad, I don't know if I would. I mean, I was a younger man, so
yeah,
you know, that you're not given all of this up front. You know, it's.
How old were you at the time when you converted to Islam? You were in university, so
20. Well, I'd come out of university. I was about 21, so from 18 to 21, around there.
Yeah, same with me actually. That's when a lot of young men are exploring, looking for meaning and purpose, and so they were giving a sort of sanitized version of Islam. The way I see this, I don't see it as taqiyya, but I see it as this is what many cultural Muslims believe. They themselves don't even know a lot of the details, right? They're just like, this is what, you know, Muhammad, there was this Jewish lady and she used to throw garbage on him every day. And then throw garbage on him, so he went to check on her and she became Muslim. But that story is completely fabricated, right? It's like, but most Muslims quote this story. They believe in a Muhammad that is so merciful and kind and that. They don't necessarily know, you know, some of the things in the seerah, and they might actually get mad if you bring them up, right?
Yeah, I'm quite sure. So I need to take a sip of water.
Oh yeah, don't worry. It's going around right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm quite sure that if I read some of this stuff back to them, say like what's in Bukhari or what's in any of the hadith, really, I would read it back to them. They would say that I'm making it up, or they wouldn't know. They're kind of like cultural Muslim, and they do believe it. They do believe it, you know. It's I remember hearing stories like about someone giving a woman giving a dog to drink, and this dog had no water, and then, you know, they gave the dog something to drink and her sins were, you know, washed away and things like this, you know. These stories that you kind of told early on. There's probably other examples that I could think of, but I remember that one, you know, and it's kind of interesting because I was just talking about the factor.
And, you know, when it comes to being a prophet, like someone that wants to get people to control them, they have to play the part. They need to say some things which are nice and rosy and godly and take care of your neighbor and, you know, love each other. If you don't say that, you can't just say, hey, me. You gotta follow me. You gotta obey me. And then you don't say, like, you know, it's a tradition that I believe Muhammad was familiar with when he heard about the Jewish Bible and he read it, heard it narrated to him, probably couldn't read it. So let's take a little bit of more introspection. So you were Muslim for how long?
So I left Islam. I'm just trying to think. Me and Nina have been married for 4 years.
So you converted to Islam?
Yeah. So I would say about 13 to 14 years, because the last year I was working my way out of it. Yeah. Going in and out, you know, I would say, because I'm married, you know, by the time I got married, I'd learned enough.
So the Imam tried to hook you up. You told me this privately earlier. The Imam wanted you to be married to a Muslim woman, and they tried to hook you up with someone.
Yeah, the first, so I went with the Imam down to Birmingham for this. It was like an Islamic conference where people from all over the UK meet up, the Islamic Council of Britain, you know, so it's where everyone meets up. So he took me down to this conference, and it was kind of me being, put in at the deep end of it, you know. So you're there to learn, and it was like, wow. I stayed around another Sheikh Jazz. I stayed around at his house, and was
Okay.
kind of with him for a few days, learning from him. And I mean, he had like a PhD in microbiology. He was a clever guy.
Mm-hmm.
So at the conference, there's a sister there, and she sends her friend's husband to the Imam and says, "Who's this guy that you've brought?" And he says, "Joseph." Well, my Muslim name was Yusuf. So Yusuf, and they kind of get talking, and they basically made the groundwork for us two to meet. And we eventually, I moved out and moved down to be with her in Peterborough. So it obviously was quite strong. The Imam wanted me to be with another Muslim, and she was also a convert. So we were from similar sort of backgrounds, so it made sense that two converts would get together to secure yourselves in Islam. There's two of you that are.
Well, to be honest, to me, I find that weird. I would rather, if I was the Imam, I would rather put a convert with a born Muslim, because then they get the whole family that comes along with the too, right? Whereas when you have two converts, both of you are Muslim, both of your families are non-Muslim. So to me, that's a kind of dumb decision. I would rather,
it is, but I understand where you're coming from, but then you've got to have someone, a born Muslim, that is willing to be married to a convert, because that can be extremely difficult if the convert families are, and I've found that firsthand, so it's like, because my wife is born Muslim, so I've experienced what it's like with her family being Muslim and my family not being. I mean, they always got on, so there was no real problem. But when it came to like the wedding, you would have an Islamic wedding and an English wedding, and it's difficult because my mum wanted us to be married in a church, and obviously at the time I couldn't, and then so I see what you're saying though. You would think that being someone with a born Muslim, but this girl, she was lovely. She was a nice girl, but I wasn't in love with her. There wasn't that love there.
It wasn't a spark, right?
No, it was just, she was a nice girl, and we got on. Went to stay with her in Peterborough, and she was lovely. Eventually, she did actually get married to a born Muslim guy. So it was interesting how that worked out. I got married to someone who was born Muslim as well. But that's
so that happened. So you were Muslim for a while. How was Islam a part of your life while you were Muslim? Did you have doubts? I mean, everybody has doubts, let's say, but like, what kept you Muslim? Like, what were you involved in the mosque at all, or like, was it more like you kept your distance? And you know what I mean? Like,
I think to begin with, there wasn't them doubts. I thought I had found something. The way that Islam was explained to me was a system. There was the Sharia aspect, not so much the whole aspects of the law, but the good bits from it that I thought were good, or were good for me to hear at that time. Certain parts of, how can I say, Islamic culture, if you could say that, what surrounds it. And I think at the time I had a really bad breakup before getting into Islam. Before meeting with the Imam, I had a really horrific breakup. So I had a lot of angst with women, and when I was told, I'm being blatantly honest, when I was told the fact that, women are like, you've heard probably, women are like sweets, they're like, don't take the wrapper off and all that sort of thing. Women who take the wrapper off, women, I was told that. But this notion that you're told, well, women know how to treat their husbands, and they are, Jenna is beneath your mother's feet, all these, I'm trying to think of the words.
So what you're saying is some of the teachings about like how Islam says a wife has to be obedient to the husband and all of that resonated with you. Like a woman is crooked. There's a hadith that said a woman is crooked and don't try to straighten her or you'll break her, something like that, right? To that effect.
Well, I think for a man as well, it's very empowering to feel that you've got this very genteel woman that's going to be at your side, and she's got to listen to you, and she's got to really, there's something there. And even early on, I was told, well, men in Islam, they sometimes marry up to 4. And at the time, well, now I think no, never, not in a million years. But at that age, it's all wrapped up in a bundle for you to like Islam. And then you start getting deeper and deeper into it. And prayer was a big thing, because I'd been taught in the church to pray just to the Lord as I'm kind of talking to him. But in Islam, there was a set form to praying. You know, the wudu before you pray, the everything that you would do, you know, just before you pray, while you pray, after you pray, you know, it had its set form, and that form really kind of you know, came to me. I thought, yeah, that's quite interesting. And then there was references shown from the Bible, or Abraham prayed like this. You know, the Bible was actually used in my early days when I converted to Islam. It was used to show me that Islam was the truth. Deuteronomy 18:18. You know, these certain things, because I'm from a Christian background, that they knew that would resonate with me and that would work. So they used that Bible against me in a way. You know, it's
It's interesting that Pew Research polls show that the greatest number of in converts, people coming into the religion, the biggest in group is Christians, and the biggest out group is atheists. So you have Christians becoming Muslim, and then you have Muslims typically becoming atheists.
I'm not surprised, you know, because after seeing Islam from the inside, you know, you can understand after someone leaves that religion why you wouldn't want to have anything to do with God. I think with me it was very different, because a lot happened to me in Islam. I felt that I needed to find God, you know, even more. And it was that journey of really understanding Islam, and then, well, what is truth? Because I suppose I am a theist, you know, I've always believed in God. I've always had that relationship with God in a way. And I needed to find truth. And to me, when I really examined Christianity and its implications, I fell in love with God again, you know.
So you were Muslim for, you know, a good decade or more.
30, 40 years.
Yeah, and like, did you go for Taraweeh prayers and stuff like that? Did you pray at the mosque? And was there any community events? Do you miss any of that stuff now?
I suppose I do. You know, there's certain things that I would miss, you know, cultural aspects, but I think because a lot happened in the religion, it'd be very difficult for me to now go back on it. There's certain things that, like, you know, people, you have to separate people from the religion. You know, people are just people, and I met some amazing people in Islam, you know, some great Muslims that helped me out countless times, that, you know, would help me, give me lifts, would really, really help me, and they really meant it, and they're great people. You've got to separate them from what the religion actually teaches, you know. It's
did any of them,
I think that would have missed,
did any of them like, how did they react? Did they, I mean, you're obviously very public about leaving Islam, so did any of them find out, or did you tell them, or what happened?
Well, it was a process of me isolating myself from people for a while, and spending that time just in the books. I think I've got Bukhari next to me here. Just spending that time in the books, because over the time in Islam, I had collected a lot of hadith, because I want to know, you know, the truth about a situation. And I would hear stuff in the mosque, you know, after, say I don't know, say you've finished praying Asr and you're there after it's finished, and you're just kind of like sitting around, or even Jummah on Friday, you're just sitting around after you listen to the khutbah, you would hear a book being read that would have a hadith, and you would hear it and you think, oh, right, okay. And it happened so much that I wanted to find out, so I bought lots of books. So I spent time reading those and stopped going to mosque as much, and stopped going to events, although there's not like any major events, say like Eid, that would be spent with my wife's family, and what have you, you know. So I did kind of isolate myself for a while, and then a lot happened to me. I think people can go on my channel to view my story. You know, a lot happened to me, and I forgot the question. It's gone
Yeah,
blank.
no, I was just saying like how were things as a Muslim, and then did you miss anything? So we got over that, and then you started reading the books for yourself.
Yeah.
So what led you out of Islam then? Was it reading the hadith for yourself?
Many issues, many issues. I mean, okay, so I've got the Quran in front of me, so I'll just use that for a start.
Mm-hmm.
There were things in the Quran like that you could ask why were they there, and I know these are points that other people have raised, but even as a Muslim, before I had seen anything or heard anything, the story of Aisha was very difficult because I was told many things about Aisha growing up, but that's not the only issue by far. Growing up in Islam, she was 18 and then it went to 9 and then 6. There were different ages given. So hearing firsthand that she was 6 when they married and 9 when she consummated was very difficult, because you just think about that in your mind, for a second. That's one issue. But then say like Surah 33:57,
So was this something that like you heard? So like as a Muslim, for example, I knew about the whole Aisha thing, but I never really thought about it. Like it didn't occur to me that this was an issue even. And then, at some point in time, this became an issue. And so people started making videos on it, like Hamza Yusuf made a video, and different Imams were like responding to the fact that she was young and why is it not a problem and stuff like that. Was this something that you were told, like, because the whole she was 18 thing, I find that to be like a very minority opinion. Most of the time, people don't say that unless you really, like, that's a really weird opinion. Like, even like Yasir Qadhi said, there's no evidence she was 18. I mean, some people do say she was older. Maybe she was older.
But not by that margin. There was the fact that she was definitely not at the age of puberty. There's hadith, I was just seeing before, hadith on that, and I've read, I've got Bukhari under me here. But yeah, I suppose for a while, at first I was told she was 18.
Really?
At first, converting, they don't just blast that on you, because they would read a hadith in the early days, and Aisha's name kept cropping up, narrated Aisha, and someone said, oh, that's Prophet Muhammad's wife, and then you might say, just do a Google search, but nothing comes up, in the early days, nothing came up with say she's 9. Eventually, they say, oh, she's 18, okay, she's 18. So you don't kind of have a problem with it. But then when you really start hearing about this 9 years old coming up, then you look at it for yourself and find out, well, was she 9? But that was, so then you come to terms with it, you're thinking, okay, she's 9. There's a reason for that, because back in them days, you do this whole, thing in your head where you kind of justify Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. And that's most of the Muslims that will tell people about Aisha have done that justification in their head. So they don't have a problem with it. But that's like, it's a very pressure issue, Aisha, but it's not the only one. There's so many that I come across over and over again. Even when reading the Quran, I went through the Quran systematically and went through and literally marked out all of the pages. I show this in quite a few of my streams, because I read it cover to cover, right through. I tried to learn it in Arabic, but that's a big task. You can learn, say, Surah Al-Fatiha, you can learn other surahs, short surahs, but doing the whole task is a bigger task. And I know people say, well, you don't know Arabic, so therefore you left Islam, but that's a side issue.
Well, yeah, if you need to know Arabic to leave Islam, you should need to know Arabic to join Islam. Otherwise, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, can I read the Quran in English and see it's from God? No, you can't tell. You can't tell if you read in English. What? So I shouldn't become Muslim then? No, you should become Muslim, but you just can't leave Islam because you don't know Arabic. It's kind of like, okay, what makes your mind? Like, can I tell it's true or can I not tell it's true, right?
Yeah, it's like why did people consider me Muslim? I mean, I used to wear thobe and have my beard long and
Yeah.
everything. Like, in fact, my wife says that in the early days of meeting my wife, because she's born in religion, I used to wear full thobe in Tesco's in the UK, and she used to walk 5 paces ahead of me. You know, she just did not like me wearing the full garb. But anyway, why was it that I was considered Muslim by everyone around me when I converted to Islam and when I remained a Muslim for them years? But then if I've left the religion and I could now criticize it, I was never a Muslim to begin with. You know, no one can answer that question.
The standard changes when it comes to joining versus leaving. To join it is easy, but to leave it, you need to be a PhD. Well, theoretically, to join it, you should have to be a PhD in Arabic as well, in Islamic studies, right? But that's not the thing. So for me, the whole Aisha thing, it's less of an issue if you just consider him a man of his times, because that was something that was common back then. The big issue is that if he's considered a universal prophet for all humanity for all times, then it's very problematic that he would do this thing, because she was a child, right? And so, I mean, assuming that story is true, and if that story is not true, then it brings into question all of hadith, because this is a hadith in Bukhari, one of the strongest collections of hadith. So if you don't want to accept that she's 9, you're gonna have to throw out a whole lot of hadith, right? So it's up to you as a Muslim. Do you, like, you know, the premise 1 is hadith is true, premise 2, Aisha was 9, conclusion is, you know, there's a problem. If premise 1, hadith is not true, then we know very little about Islam, we know very little about Muhammad, and so there's not really, like, you know what I'm saying? Or there's another possibility, some hadith are true, but then which hadith are true, which are not true, and you're basically going against a consensus of the scholars that Bukhari is the gold standard, right? So that kind of puts the Muslim.
I think this, you know, what you just said, a prophet for all time and all place, you know, in the sense of his ways are meant to be emulated. That is very, very difficult, because in a modern context, most of what you're trying to emulate goes against the very grain and fabric of society. You know, it might have been, well, it wasn't, but it might have been more understandable in the 7th century, but certainly today it's not, you know, it's not understandable, especially, you know, the impact of it, like, so the Aisha issue, girls of 9 are being married today, having children, and that's really, I mean, it can ruin them, it can ruin all of the reproductive organs, you know, it's really, really bad.
That is actually one of the terrible consequences of this thing, that, you know, Muhammad is, the claim that Muhammad married a 9-year-old has prevented many countries from reforming the laws, because they keep going back to, well, he did it, so it's okay. Thankfully, not everyone agrees with this, but many countries, including Pakistan, including Saudi Arabia, and including Yemen, have blocked any reform on child marriage laws because of this, unfortunately. I was going to say, like, you have similar stories in the Bible too, of like child marriages, of polygamy, which is why I was saying that if you look at it as something that happened in that time, it was quite normal. It's just that now we know better, right? You know what I mean? We know better. We understand that.
So, which is, you know, we can talk about that maybe another time as well, about the Bible matching up with, say, the Quran, like stuff like that happening. But in a modern day, let's just say, like from New Testament onwards, in a modern day context, I was thinking about this just before, you don't have Christians, even when we say want to be more like Christ, being more like Christ is a good thing. You know, you love people more, you're more charitable, you know, you're generally a much better person than you were before because you were a sinner. You know, it's quite a good thing. But if you act more like Muhammad, it's very, very difficult. You're going to run into lots of problems in this country with the law. And they are, you know, them guys are locked up in jail because they're trying to do that. You know, I've got, just to, I think I've shown this before. So this is like an abridged version of Bukhari, a summarized version of Bukhari. I've got the entire Sahih Muslim as well in there. I went through that systematically, and people say, no, don't go through it without a scholar. Don't go through it without a scholar. And I'm like, why? because, and I think it's very obvious why, because you are going to lose faith in Muhammad. And if you have to have a scholar to interpret everything in this religion for you, then you have more faith in that scholar than you do in your own prophet. And that's the problem.
I didn't have that experience. Like, one of the first books I bought when I converted to Islam, I mean converted to Sunni Islam, because I was a Smiley.
Yes.
Is Sahih Bukhari. My Muslim friend took me to the Islamic bookstore, and I asked him, what book should I get? And I had a Quran already, but they said, I had a Yusuf Ali translation. They said, why don't you get this Sahih International version, which this is highly recommended. I got it. I also got the Mohsin Khan one, the Saudi one.
I think that's why I've got there, Muslim Khan,
And then I got Bukhari, and I read Bukhari from cover to cover, the summarized one, the same one you have.
Yeah.
And I was like, a lot of the hadith were really, really weird. Yeah. And I would ask my friends about it. I'm like, this is weird, like kill the black dogs or something, right?
Yeah.
And they're like,
I made a video about that the other day,
that's babies or something, right? And I'm like, this is like so bad. Like, why doesn't it just say that in the book? Like, this is rabies or something. Why do I need to ask? Like, how come it's so weird? Yeah. I wish I had that email I sent, because I had this email where I sent to my friends, and I'm like, some of this stuff is very strange. And I was trying to wrap my head around it. Eventually, I accepted it. And at some point, I just became a dogmatic believer. I'm like, yeah, whatever's in Bukhari is true, so I have to accept it. But it wasn't, nobody told me not to read Bukhari. No, they did say, and you find this among the so Salafis love Bukhari and Muslim. I mean, everybody loves Bukhari and Muslim, but what I mean is they love reading it. Whereas the other Muslims, the non-Salafis, like the Madhabis, they will say you can read it, but don't come up with your own interpretations based on that. So, like, if the hadith says Muhammad, he did wudu like this or whatever, you don't necessarily go by that one hadith, because maybe in another hadith he contradicted himself and he did something else. So, like, for example, don't stand while peeing, but he did that in another case. You can't just go and make your own rulings straight from the book. Nobody said don't read. In fact, people told me, read the story of the Prophet, read the Seerah, read the biography of Muhammad on your own. Nobody told me you can't read it. So it's quite interesting how, like, what a different experience you have from me. Like,
so
is that
UK? So I think that is a massive reason. In the UK, we have an extremely big Muslim population, and we're very, very close together. The reason that's I'm trying to frame this in the right way. The reason that's important is because when Westerners or when converts come to the religion, they know how difficult it can be for them. So they try and steer them away from reading Bukhari and reading Muslim.
Because you're a convert.
Because you're a convert.
Yeah.
And with the tensions that we have in England, especially, it's extremely beneficial for converts to be in the religion.
Yeah.
Because they're almost an example to other English people.
Especially white converts, eh?
Yeah. So it's why I could, like, walk into certain Islamic stores and I'd go get thobe, sort of perfume and other bits, the bits that I would get. And I'd go to put it on the counter and they'd say, no, just take it.
So can I I want to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Someone said, oh no, it doesn't say kill the black dogs. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. CP. They're calling me CP. It doesn't say kill the black dogs. Doesn't it say that right there in front of your eyes? The Prophet of Allah ordered to kill dogs, all dogs. And even we were even killing a dog that someone brought with it from the desert. Then he said, just kill only the black ones.
Yeah.
So this is a good example. People are saying, oh no, Islam doesn't say that, but it actually does. It actually does say that. Like, it actually says kill the black dog, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so to continue on that, so yeah, definitely Muslim converts are put on a pedestal, and they're put, at a higher status, and I mean they're paraded around, and
they're very much used. They're very much used. More so than I would say, other people. And I met some interesting people over the course of being in Islam. I've met Dawaman. I met him once in Leicester. That was an interesting story. But I met some people that have now ended up in jail for terrorism. You know,
Okay, I missed that. I got disconnected. Can you rewind? Sorry, say that again.
yeah, okay. I met some interesting people in Islam, I would say, whether it was at mosques or at rallies or at dawah stalls, because I was often asked to go on the dawah stall and give dawah, you know, even though I would say, yeah, okay, I knew enough that I could speak to people about Islam, but to advocate for Islam anyway. I met some interesting people. I met Dawah Man once in Leicester, and I know, you know, he's an interesting character. But I've also met some people that have ended up in jail for terrorism. You know, it's Islam in this country is very different to say. I won't say it's very different. They follow the same thing. I mean, the cultural aspects of it are very different. I've made some videos about the type of people that I met. The other guy I once did a YouTube video with that's been taken down, and I've been trying to find this YouTube video. Haytham Hiddad, who is who's well known. Yeah, I did a YouTube video with him, you know, where he talks about my conversion into Islam, and it's been taken down since I've started doing.
Oh, he talked about you?
I was with him in the video. This was in Leicester. So, you know, when you kind of like come across all these people, you're used as a convert for when you're needed to talk to other Westerners about Islam, you know.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing with sort of English people who convert to Islam.
And you were saying something about terrorism? What was that?
So I've met some people, say in Central Masjid in Leicester, that I've later found out they've ended up in jail for terrorism offences. Wow. And these are people, you know, why would Islam attract so many people that go on the same path? You know, it's because they're reading the same material as I'm reading, but that their interpretation of how they act upon it is very different. You know.
Yeah, this is a problem with the Islamic texts. They have some terrible things in them, and thankfully most Muslims are able to kind of ignore those things. Most scholars are even not jihadis, in the sense that they do not allow jihad. Most Salafis say terrorism is completely against the religion. Most Hanafis and the rest of them, they're also even furthermore against it. But of course, there's always a minority that are able to find these things, because these things exist in the books, right?
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, you get a lot more people that follow this religion who end up going down a very dark path. There's a beautiful book called The Way of Strangers by Graham Wood, and he basically talks about how one of the top members of ISIS, his name was John Yahya. He was a Christian in the middle of USA, in America, I think Texas, I remember. His mom bought him a Quran, which was honestly like probably the worst mistake she made. She didn't know this was going to happen, but she bought him a Quran. The guy converted to Islam. He became the most fanatical, hardcore believer. He learned Arabic. He became a master of Islamic studies. And then he went and he became one of the highest ranking ISIS members in the world. I mean, this is insane. Like, how do you get someone like white American becoming this crazy jihadi guy? That's like
they do, you know, right? Like, they do. I used to hear it in the mosque. Sorry to cut you off. It's just spot. I used to hear things in the mosque. Not every mosque I went to, but a few of them that I would say are definitely on the fringes, because a lot of the mosques are in houses. You know, they're not even in the UK. They're in someone's living room that they're converted into a mosque. And I used to go to a few that I would say are definitely on the fringes. You know, and as a definitely on the fringes of their teachings, but their teachings were derived from the same sources. It's just the content, the way that they give it is it's using the source material, just giving it in a different way for someone to understand it, you know, properly, and then they act on that. So I remember when ISIS started, you know, in like sort of 2013, when the Arab Spring happened, and you know, I wouldn't really say it was eye-opening, because there was a lot of incidents before that, but it definitely made it more difficult to be a convert. There
It's
was no
interesting
way.
because the other Islamic convert I talked to just before you, he became Muslim after 9/11. So there's also examples like that, which is quite interesting, right? And he didn't become any sort of crazy terrorist guy. Thankfully, he left Islam. But it's fascinating how, you know, when you were saying that if someone was to take Muhammad as a perfect role model, they would be locked up. It's kind of tough because I think it doesn't make sense to take everything he did in his time and apply it, because he was a leader of a state. He was actually 7th century, right? So it's how do you? But some Muslims try to, but thankfully most Muslims don't just black and white take what he did. What they try to do is they try to interpret it through the scholars, and the scholars tend to, you know, like you said, water it down a bit and, you know, sanitize it. And of course, there's rules too, right? Like, for example, there's rules for jihad. You can't just go and fight wherever you want. There's no vigilantism allowed in Islam. Most scholars say you have to obey the law of the land. And some of them will even go to the Quran and say, well, look at, for example, the story of Yusuf. And, you know, he had this position and he worked within the law. So there's this whole thing called the fiqh of minorities as well. So I'm just saying all of this because I don't want to give the wrong impression that, like, you know, Muslims are like some bloodthirsty animals that are going to go out and like murder people.
You're absolutely right.
You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. I think what I meant by that is if you follow it, if obviously people don't follow it literally, which is great. But if you did, it was more of a thought experiment. If you did do it literally, you would. But you're right. There's definitely on the fringes of Islam, and I know lots of fantastic Muslim people, as I said before at the start of the stream. So it's great that people don't follow it literally and they're not as black and white as that. You know, but I suppose even there, like, even say you have to follow the rules of the land. That's still interesting because it creates a distaste for the place around you. I remember
I'd say what creates a distaste is the whole teaching about us versus them. For example, these are the kuffar and these are the Muslims. And, you know, some take it even further and they say Darul Harb, Darul Iman, or Darul Salam, the place of Islam and the place of the kuffar.
I mean, that them and us is definitely there as well, because I used to pick up like flyers and things like that on dawah stalls, or sort of give like the Dawah Islam, you know, certain flyers and stuff like that. I'm losing myself there for a second. I'm trying to think of an example of them and us that I used to hear. Okay, so the Sharia. This is before ISIS, and I used to hear of the Sharia and Sharia law. And if Sharia law was in place, all of these women that go out and get drunk on Friday night and show themselves to men and things like that, that wouldn't be there. It was almost given a utopian vision of what I'm talking about. My experience in Islam, not necessarily.
I have some examples. I have some examples. Can I share some examples?
Yeah, of course you can.
I have this right here. For example, you know, it says in the Quran, Allah has forbidden the believers to take the kafirin as friends, right? And this was in Surah 551. And then, you know, some of the scholars have spoken, especially Salafi scholars, they love these things, right? But there is teachings like this, right? In the Quran, right? Like, don't take the Jews and Christians as friends. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, but that's part of the Quran, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can give examples as well about how good humanity is. You know, I'm trying to think of if he had saved himself, mankind. I'm trying to think of the verse at the top of my head. I've just got
which one?
Because it's dead hot in here. It's like I'm in the tiny little things. So
what are you referring to? Which teaching?
Save all of mankind.
Oh yeah, there's a verse like that. If you save one human, it's like you saved all of mankind.
Saved all of mankind.
Something like that. I remember that.
You can use examples like that from the Quran to justify saying, "Oh, see, look, you know, killing's really, really wrong." And it is, you know, and there are many Muslims that believe in that teaching, you know, which is fantastic, but there's always a fringe element that is going to push it on the other teachings, you know.
And that's, to me, you know, that's kind of what happens with religion in general. I know you yourself are a Christian, but it's always going to be a contradictory thing where there's going to be some things that say this and some things that say this, and then it's human effort that has to, like, kind of, you know, try to pull out the parts that need to be applied and not applied. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't think necessarily I've found that contradiction in Christianity, although I've read a lot of the arguments say against Christ, but I'm talking about against Christianity, but I'm talking about applying being like Christ in your life. You know, there was, in Islam, you were told, well, Jesus is a prophet of Allah. You know, Jesus is this prophet of Allah, but Jesus was never killed nor crucified, only was made to appear like he was.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I delved into that a little bit more and looked at elements in the Quran where it would say Mary, Jesus, and God, and the basic arguments of, well, the Trinity is not even right in the Quran, and I would look at Jesus a bit more, for me, I found it more comforting, the fact that even in Islam, Jesus is sinless. Even in Islam, you know, Jesus is a prophet of God. So I looked at Christ more. And when I applied living like Christ and became a Christian again, I found it not to have contradiction in my own life. Islam, I always felt, was very difficult because a lot of the principles in Islam that you were told to believe in, like even child marriage, and you're not told to believe in child marriage, but Muhammad marrying a younger bride, I found contradictions to myself. You know, I think many converts do, that you can suppress it for so long, but you find that it's very difficult to very difficult to rationalize it.
Yeah, so a lot of people are pointing out that specific verse was actually comes from the Bible, or it's the Torah, and so that's a good point about if you killed one of, you know, it was decreed to the children of Israel.
I think it's in the Talmud. I think it's in the Talmud.
And I was gonna say, I like, from my perspective, there's some very good channels such as Thurman Trees, Dark Matter 2525, Matt Dillahunty, that actually have, and Non-Stamp Collector, that go through some of the contradictions in the Bible, because I do believe the Bible has contradictions as well. But in terms of like what you get out of it, that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem for you as a believer. If you're okay with, you know, these, like, many people are willing to acknowledge the problem. It's more of a problem, I think, for Muslims, because they take the whole thing as a literal word of God. So when you even point out a contradiction, like, that's not a contradiction.
It can't be. The Quran
can't be a contradiction. And some Christians would do that too. They'll say this is not a contradiction. They'll come up with very, very clever ways to sort of reconcile the two conflicting things or whatever, right? But that's my perspective on that.
I think, so say like that, you would be willing to point out, you know, what would you would see as a contradiction. I'm not necessarily claiming, although I am a Christian, I'm not necessarily claiming that you don't see that contradiction. But in Islam, if you even bring out a contradiction that is definitely there, you know, you can automatically be kind of thrown out the religion. Even, you know, if I'm saying, look, I'm a Muslim and I do believe that this is a contradiction, and I feel that this is wrong, and I feel like this is wrong, you can't still be a Muslim because you accept it all, or you accept, you know, you're out. Basically, you could be put into a disbeliever. You know, there's more
Absolutely,
with Islam.
It's much. You can't take it. The Quran, the standard is very high. If you say there's even one mistake in the Quran or any sort of, you can't say that. You can't even say the Quran's not preserved. You can't even say Muhammad could read and write. And some people would consider you a disbeliever just for saying that. So it's very tenuous. I mean, with Muslims, with the Islamic scripture, it's like, you can't really say anything without getting attacked, right? As a Muslim scholar, as a Muslim, which is why Muslim academics, most of the time, they're non-Muslims, because Muslims can't say these things, you know?
No, exactly. And I think a very big part of the religion is this making Muhammad your example. You know, when you make, even like going to the bathroom, you know, the way that you would have to cleanse yourself after you've been to the toilet, you know, whether it's whatever, you know, you'd have to cleanse yourself. Even that comes from, you know, that comes from Muhammad, because that was recorded as what he did. You know, it's why you can get into arguments with other Muslims as, well, Muhammad did stand up, Muhammad didn't stand up. You know, you can get into arguments about just the way he went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's extremely difficult.
There's a lot of fights in Islam over whether you should move the finger or not move the finger.
Yeah,
Put your hand down here. Is it shoulder to shoulder, not shoulder to shoulder?
Yeah.
These are all differences in the legal.
And law. You must have seen in the masjid when someone's praying and someone does this and someone doesn't do this, and then, you know, what, there's these differences even in the way they pray. And now most Muslims would agree that they'd say, well, if you find that right, do that, but you have to follow at least the set of, say, 4 ways of praying. You can't pray completely differently. You can't say, I want to turn that way, I don't want to turn that way. You know, that's the way it is. It's set like that, and that comes from the hadith. So if you even say, look at the hadith or seerah or any of the literature and look at it with a close eye and examine it, say for however length of periods, you will find these contradictions in there. We're not just making contradictions up out of these books. That we all say, go examine them for yourself, you know, examine all of the claims. And that's kind of what I did. It's why my journey out of Islam was very, very tough. You know, me and my wife split up, and it was an extremely tough journey. And I ended up trying to tell people this stuff that I know. And that was not that. Don't ever do that. You know, if you're in a bad situation, or, you know, you think you're teaching people that want to hear it, you're not. You know, it can be really difficult. I just tried to teach people what I knew about Islam, and I got myself into big hot water with it. You know, so now I've set up a YouTube channel, and I do it on YouTube because it's safer to actually for people to view it.
I wanted to share something. I have an article on my blog about this man by the name of Abu Zaid, and he was a Muslim. He wasn't a non-Muslim. He was an ex-Muslim, and he was trying to, I don't want to say he was trying to reform Islam, but he was looking at it and he was being skeptical about some of the things like academics should be. That's what academia is about. It's about studying critically, right? And he was kicked out of Egypt. He had death threats, and you know, it was like his wife was forced, his marriage was nullified to his wife, and he was just simply a Muslim researcher, right? I mean, this can happen to you if you try to say things. I mean, all he said was you have to understand it to a literary approach, and you know, they call him an apostate, and he had to run away from Egypt. Like, I mean, this is crazy. Like, that's the academic situation now. So you have a lot of non-Muslims who are studying Islam, Orientalists, and they're able to do it because they don't get death threats because they're in universities. And I think a lot of the stuff they're actually bringing out is so amazing, but it's just not mainstream. It's not common knowledge to people, you know?
Yeah, it's got to be put into a form that people, you know, will see. I think, like, look at the apostasy laws. So the apostasy laws are fascinating because there's so many things that can put you into the camp, being in the camp of being an apostate. Say, like, even in a Muslim majority country, Pakistan, you know, I say Saudi, but some parts of it are more liberal than others. The apostasy laws are one thing that if you're accused of being an apostate and they can find something that will put you in that category, your life can be over. It's very, very subjective. You know, it's like you have to follow it 100% or you can't follow it at all necessarily. You know, the apostasy laws, I think, are interesting.
What did you mean about follow it all or follow none of it? Sorry, what did you mean?
So with the apostasy laws, say like you're in a Muslim country and you're accused of being an apostate, they can find things in that person and accuse them of being an apostate for stuff that is very subjective. You know, you have to live it all, or, you know, it has to be all or nothing, basically. being a Muslim. You can't be half a Muslim. You can't say, yeah, I kind of believe it. You know, it's in a Muslim country. Yeah, you know, I follow. Well, I eat that way, but I don't do that way. I'll go to a mosque occasionally. You know, maybe in the UK we can, because we've not got that apostasy law. But if you're in a country that it's the regime there, like Iran or wherever, you have to live that, you know, or say like Saudi.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A couple of people are calling me out on my claim. I'm just going to quickly share something. I'm not an expert on Christianity, but people are asking me like, what did I mean about child marriage? I mean, it's just common knowledge that
Oh yeah, okay,
things happened in the past. I'm not saying that it's necessarily allowed in Christianity. I'm not making that claim. I'm just saying that the Bible contains examples of these things. That's all I was saying. Like, for example, you know, Numbers 31:17-18, the God told Moses to kill all the men and to leave the virgin women alive, right? So this is an example. And again, you can resolve this however you like, but I'm not saying Christianity allows this. Christianity, in my opinion, is much better for women, and, you know, in general, than Islam is, because like you can't have 4 wives, for example. You can have 1 wife. Although I do think it's problematic that some people would say divorce is never allowed, because what if you
in Christianity?
Right? In Christianity, I'm saying. So there's some downsides too, in my opinion, in Christianity, like never being allowed to divorce, but it's still much better.
Yeah.
My opinion, it's much better than Islam.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever come across. No, I mean, you might get certain scholars maybe saying that, but in a real practice, in the real world, no, I've never.
Told me you can't, once you're married, you can never divorce. This is, Jesus said that divorce is sinful, and so he's like, once you're married, that's it. And I'm like, well, what if something happens, then it doesn't work out? And he's like, well, and some people would even consider it like adultery if you get married again and they won't marry you, the church won't marry you again. I think in the modern world,
that is still applicable in the C of E, Church of England. Church of England is still applicable. I don't think the divorce thing is, but I think if they marry you once, they won't marry you again to another person. I think that's still applicable in the C of E, but don't quote me. But I can remember someone saying that.
So just to get back to your story, you had some really bad experiences after leaving Islam, didn't you?
Yeah, so I started, basically, there was, if you see it on my own channel, I've gone into it in more detail, but I kind of split up with my wife because of all of this that was going on, and ended up in a homeless shelter.
Oh, wow.
For men, yeah, quite. So it was, you know, it was bad times.
Yeah.
I go into it more on my channel, and then I started to teach people who were in there, you know, like about Islam, and that was the biggest mistake. You know, like you just get talking to someone, and then they find out through someone that you used to be a convert to Islam, and they'll start asking you questions on it, and I just start giving the answers of why I left, you know. And if that gets back to the wrong person in the mosque, you know, it's like what happened with me, you know. I was stabbed and run over and everything, you know. It's gets in the hands of the wrong people, there's twice as much reason to get you, you know. It's why this big scar right here, which is burning because of the heat in here.
When did that happen? Hello?
This would be, I've been here a year, so 2 years. Hello.
Okay, so this happened because you were talking about Islam. Someone attacked you. A Muslim attacked you?
Well, there's about two Muslim lads attacked me, and it was enough. It was enough to pee him off, you know, like really pee him off. And there was a few other stuff that had gone on with the hostel at the time.
Was that because something that happened in real life, or your channel, or what?
No, my channel. I didn't even have my channel back then. Okay. I was literally just telling them things about Muhammad that they did not like hearing, and that was enough reason to really. I mean, if you tick off the wrong people, you know, I've got more of a reason than, you know, you pay them. This is even more of a reason that you're an apostate. I say YouTube's much safer.
Yeah, it is actually. And I haven't the people I talked to all knew me really well, so no one is attacking me. I mean, the worst that happened to me was, thankfully, one guy said, I'm not going to help you move houses. And I was like, Why?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, oh, because you have a blog against Islam. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, but I still have a family and they're still Muslim. At the time, everyone was Muslim, but whatever. I'm like, okay, fine. Anyways, I ended up getting movers. I paid for movers, but definitely when you leave the community, you lose a lot. And I had someone try to get me fired as well from my job, unfortunately. But that's what you went through is actually much worse. I hope you don't go through that again. I think UK is a little bit more dangerous than Canada, to be honest.
We've got a lot of cases in the UK of girls that have gone missing and never been found, and they trace them back years later. In fact, they find them underneath dead. There's been cases, quite horrific ones here in the UK, and a lot can just put you in that camp. I mean, I was openly criticizing Muhammad at the time because I had washed my hands away from Islam. But if you're a woman and you start seeing a non-Muslim boy and your brothers find out, or your father finds out, there's a lot that can happen, and it does happen in the UK. So I always think,
it's really unfortunate. I'm saying that. I'm just glad I'm in Canada, honestly.
Yeah, the UK. I mean, we're meant to have the protection of the law here in the UK, of course, but with all the problems that are happening in some of the inner cities and things like that, sometimes if you call them and say, I think I'm going to be killed for apostasy, they'll, there's women that will call the UK police and say, my parents are going to marry me off. And they'll step in then. Police aren't, I like the police and I've got a lot of respect for what they do, but even in the UK, I was working with a group for a while that wants to have laws put in place specifically for apostasy, so that people can call in and say, this is what I'm thinking is going to happen to me, and the police will act on that intel,
Wow.
Because we've had too many cases. We've just had too many cases.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, because I know there's a bit of a bias there in trying to not look racist.
Right? Oh, yeah, with our police officers. Yeah. So we've had that with Rotherham and examples happen where they don't want to seem racist, but I think at the same time, if a religion teaches this and some people follow it, not all Muslims, of course, there are great Muslims. I talked about people that I used to know who are still awesome people. Some families will follow that, so
it's really unfortunate, honestly. I think like the dynamics are very different in UK. I think you have a lot more hardcore like Dawa man and people like that. You even have those Anjem Chaudhry, and you have you have a lot of people, like crazy people in the UK.
This is what I mean. They've locked a lot of them up. But towards just before, I'm saying 2013, 2014, there was pamphlets being passed out. I've still got some of them that were advocating for, and I don't know how we got onto the subject, but were advocating for ISIS before it was even properly formed. They were, I've kept some of the leaflets, and I've done a video on one of them. It's there. We do have dawah stalls because of our tolerance levels. We allow terrorists to walk down the street with full flags and all sorts. That's the fringe. That's the fringe end side of things.
If they're definitely, I mean, we have groups here too, like Hizb ut-Tahrir. We were basically the Islamic Caliphate group, but not like ISIS, just like Khalifa people, and they want to bring back the Islamic State. And for some reason, they don't accept ISIS. I never looked into why they don't like ISIS, but they don't like ISIS. But they're like going around on campuses. They'll debate. They'll even go in many Muslim speeches, and they'll shout down the Muslim speakers, saying you're misguided. And so I don't know if they'll say you're a kafir, because that looks bad. But they'll like say you're all wrong.
Yeah, you're all wrong.
Never mind, focus on purity and self-improvement. No, we need Sharia, we need this, and they're allowed to say these things because they're not actually calling violence. They'll say things like, in an Islamic state, an ex-Muslim will be killed, which is horrible, but because they're not saying we should kill you right now, they're allowed, right? And it's a challenging thing with liberalism and free speech that where do you draw the line? Because I'm not a free speech absolutist. I think that if someone's calling, there's a certain point where you have to say enough is enough, and you can't allow these things. For example, calling to violence, hate speech against a particular group. But of course, where do you draw the line? And sometimes in a liberal societies, they draw the line a little bit too far. So like our speech, if this speech was considered hate speech, obviously I would disagree. This is not hate speech. We're having into academic conversation, a friend chat on. It's not hate speech. No one.
No, and I mean,
we anything like that.
We have, we have a program here in the UK. I think it's like a question program. So they get an audience together and ask them questions by a guy called Nicky Campbell. The show's just gone out of my mind for a minute. But yeah, and they get people from all backgrounds on this show just to talk, intellectuals, just to talk about. But they always get on a radical. They always get on a radical because they've got to have someone from, say, every camp. Someone on the right, someone on the left, and And it's the radical that when he asks him a question, so when he says, "Is Sharia meant for the UK?" He'll ask him a question, and the radical is going to say, "Yep, it's meant for the UK. It's meant to cover the whole world." And what he's doing is he's trying to draw everyone in to shut him down on his speech and show him the stupidity of it. But I always think whenever they get these guys on to do that, and I used to know some of these guys, I've met them in Leicester and all sorts, where is it they draw their teachings from? Their teachings. And they find that in, say, the Sirah, the Hadith, whether you would say it's a fringe ideology, they still find the teachings there. So in their misconstrued world, that's what they think Islam is. And that's the problem, It's
I don't
think good Muslims that outbalance it, outbalance it. It's them. It's all the good Muslims are the guy that's shouting him down. That's what I'm trying to draw the comparison to.
Yeah, I don't think Islamism or the wanting to establish Islamic law is fringe. I don't think so. I think it's pretty mainstream. I think Western Muslims tend to be a little bit detached from this, which is why groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir want to call for Sharia law, and Muslim Brotherhood as well wants to bring back Sharia law. They all have different means and methods. Hizb ut-Tahrir thinks it's sort of all or none. We need an Islamic state. Muslim Brotherhood tries to work within the government, but in general, the creeping Sharia meme is sort of overblown, in my opinion, because we're not going to be chopping off hands in UK anytime soon. We're not going to be stoning adulterers. We're not going to be doing any of these things. For sure, they want to bring it back, and most likely this will come back in a Muslim country. I mean, Egypt tried to do it when they voted in Muslim Brotherhood, but of course, Ikhwani Muslimun were kicked out by the army, and geopolitical forces. Erdogan wants to bring, he's done a lot of stuff with Islamic law. I don't know the details exactly, but it comes and goes, I think. But thankfully, as long as we stay strong with liberalism and humanism, and we keep saying that we have to constantly talk about these things, because otherwise we slip back into that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think talking about this sort of subject and bringing the information to the surface about Islam, all the information about Islam to the surface, people can then choose. People have the right to then choose. They can then say, yep, Sharia and everything, all the hadith and everything, I'm still a Muslim. And you could say, okay. And then it's up to that person's moral conviction not to go down the line of that. But I think all the information still should be shared by content creators on YouTube, by other avenues, radio and things like that. It should become mainstream thought that most people know about Islam, and that's when I think we can start with to really see the numbers. I mean, convert numbers in the UK are dropping. Not many people are converting to Islam because, say, like, when I converted, most of what was seeing massive views on YouTube were stories of Islam. They really they could just walk on the platform and make loads of videos. In fact, there's another guy that used to be a Muslim on YouTube. I think he's Canadian, actually. He's called Don't Convert to Islam.
Oh, yeah.
used to be called Convert to Islam. That was his first channel.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to watch him back in the day. You know, this is years ago, and it's interesting that most of the stuff that he was preaching and teaching, you know, this is back then. But now it seems to have turned the other way, and people have actually.
I think there's still a lot of people converting to Islam. I just feel like it has slowed down. I agree with you, it has slowed down. I think there's a lot more counter apologetics now. I think there's a lot more ex-Muslim / Christian channels have been there a lot longer than ex-Muslim channels. Like sites like Sam Shamoon, David Wood, and Answering Islam. These websites have been out there for a lot longer than some of the newest stuff that we're finding now, like Wiki Islam, which is an ex-Muslims of North America project. You know, obviously Abdullah Sameer, The Masked Arab. There's a ton of ex-Muslim channels too, but still, there's still a lot of people converting to Islam. The polls show that people still convert to Islam. For sure, there's a lot of people leaving Islam. You know, one poll I read shows that there's the same number of people joining Islam as leaving Islam, but of course the birth rates are still very high for Muslims. So that's kind of shifting the balance, and that's why the Muslim population is still growing. One poll said or predicted, I don't know if it's a poll or a study or whatever, that there's going to be 2 billion Muslims in the world at one point. So it's growing. It's definitely growing, which is why, you know, we need to keep talking about these things. We need to challenge Islam, not because we're against Muslims, but because we don't want the values and the teachings and the beliefs of Islam to influence the world negatively. We don't want, you know, women to have, you know, second-class status in the world. We don't want people to be attacked for leaving Islam, for freedom of choice. If someone doesn't want to be Muslim, they should be allowed to not be Muslim. I mean, I always tell people, like, when they say you should be killed for leaving Islam, well, what if they killed Muslims what if this law applied to all religions? Then everyone that converted would die. What about all of the Christians you have that became Muslim, like Yusuf Estes, like Hamza Yusuf, like Bilal Phillips? Should they be killed because they converted to another religion? So why are you saying that if someone converts to another religion and leaves Islam and they speak about it, they should be killed? Like, think about the moral, how evil it is. Not, I don't want to say evil, but think about how wrong it is for you to say that it's okay to kill someone for leaving Islam in an Islamic state, because you're doing that. How many people come to Islam because of that? You know what I'm saying? So it has to be called out. We need to keep talking about this. This is an important matter. So thank you for coming on the channel. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share the link to your channel below in the comments. I'm going to put in the description as well. Please do check it out. Do you want to add anything else before we end the stream?
I just think, you know, if people share information, you know, to their friends, content creators like yourself, like, you know, myself and other guys on the platform, I think we have took a big risk coming out, and, you know, massive risk to come out on the internet and criticize Islam, because now everyone knows our face, and, you know, people will associate us with that. But I think lastly, I know some great Muslim people still, but that doesn't mean that Islam is still then perfect. You know, I think that's the way that I would sum it up.
Yeah, like many Muslims are better than the religion. They are good people, and the religion is not good. They're better than the religion, right? I mean, that's how I would put it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And kind of like, look at the claims. Most people would say, look at our claims about Islam, study it more for yourself, you know, and just look at the claims. I mean, I don't necessarily profess to be an apologist. You know, I don't. I just know, kind of, from what I know, this is what I've learned and this is what I'm sharing. You know, there are people that are apologists that do it much better than I do, you know. So, yeah, that's what I'll add to it. And thank you for having me on, Abdullah. It'll be, it's great.
Thank you as well. I'm going to share your channel in the description. Is there anywhere else you want to be reached? Are you on Facebook or Twitter, anything, or just YouTube?
Just YouTube. I think my other links for Discord and stuff like that are on my channel. Yeah. So
perfect. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. And if you're new here, please consider joining the channel. I could use the support and definitely appreciate it. Thank you, Solitary Emmy, for coming on and joining the channel as well. And for everyone else who tuned in, thank you, Joseph, for sharing your story with us. I Most appreciated. And yeah, we'll see you again another time.
Definitely,
Take care,
definitely.
everyone.
Thanks,
Be
Abdullah.
safe, as it's kind of crazy out there. Today's March 16, 2020.
Yeah.
Coronavirus is spreading like.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that today, but
We
yeah.
talked a little bit before the stream, and just my 2 thoughts, my 2 cents on that is just avoid any unnecessary gatherings right now. Yes, the economy is going to be hit hard, but we will catch up. We will make up for all of that lost time. But don't, if you can avoid it, if there's something you don't need to do, if whether it's going out to a club, a pub, going for Jummah prayers or church services, this virus is highly contagious. It spreads like crazy. Even if you're young and you're probably not going to die from it, just remember that you might spread it to someone else who will die.
Yeah.
Whether it's your mother, father, your grandfather, your grandparents, you
Very
might
much.
be fine. Probably most of us under 40 will be fine. But there's going to be a lot of old people who will die from this. And especially if you overwhelm the public infrastructure system, the healthcare system, which is already in many places strained, it's going to reach a breaking point. So let's all do our part by just making sure we wash our hands before we eat. When you come home, wash your hands. Avoid any large gatherings. If you need to do grocery shopping, of course you have to buy groceries, do that, but avoid anything that you can delay for now. Just wait a week or two. Let the virus die down, because if it can't infect people, it's just going to go away, right? It's going to eventually disappear. I mean, that there'll be still cases, but it's not going to be like what we're getting now, which is a global.
What you were saying with the bell curve, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. So okay, everyone, thank you so much, and see you again another time.
Thank you. Bye bye. See ya.